innocence.
Be the weekend.
Introducing Creative Mornings Birmingham. Birmingham is one of 195 cities across the globe hosting monthly breakfast lectures to encourage creativity and community. You might be wondering, what counts for creativity? And am I creative? The answer is yes and yes.
Creativity is any time that you solve a problem in an unconventional way. If you're alive right now, you are creating something.
Creativity to me is something that you're born with.
Creativity to me, in a word, would be curiosity.
So, are you creative? What should you expect at Creative Mornings? Fresh coffee, friendly people, and an array of breakfast foods. It's an open event that celebrates and connects the city's creative talent. All you have to do is show up, be yourself, connect with others, and be open to new ideas. Come join us. And remember,
Everyone is creative.
Everyone's welcome.
I'm the host and founder of the Birmingham chapter. And I'm so excited y'all are here today for our first ever virtual panel. With today's current events, we felt compelled to do our part in providing insight and education on racism and inclusion in our own Birmingham community. Creative Mornings celebrates the fact that everyone is welcome, and we want to make sure that we remember that today during this panel as we continue to strive to make this community a better place. If you have any questions for the panel, feel free to leave a comment in the chat. As y'all know, the purpose of Creative Mornings is more than just free food and coffee, but to create meaningful relationships with one another. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections and learning from others, and in virtual hugs and high fives. Everyone is creative. Everyone is welcome. Our theme this month is insecure, and we are so happy to have the Vice President of Business Development at the Birmingham Business Alliance, Mr. Victor Brown, moderate today's panel. Everyone, please help me welcome our panelists. Before we get started, though, if y'all could go around and state your name, organization, or company that you represent, and then your favorite ice cream flavor, just to help us get to know you, that would be wonderful. Javacia, we will start with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Javacia Harris-Bowser, and I am a freelance journalist, and I'm also the founder of C. Jane Write, which is a website and membership community for women who write and blog. And it may be kind of boring, but my favorite ice cream flavor is plain Jane vanilla.
Nice. All right, Robert.
My name is Robert Hernandez. I am the creative director for BBVA USA, but I'm also the founder of the nonprofit organization Alabama Multicultural Organization, aka AMOR. And my favorite ice cream is a new ice cream that's keto friendly called Enlightenment, and it's butter pecan.
Very nice. I have to try that one. That sounds good. T. Marie.
I'm T. Marie King, community organizer and activist, and my favorite ice cream flavor is mint chip.
Yum. And Victor.
Hi, my name is Victor Brown. I'm an economic developer with the Birmingham Business Alliance, and my favorite ice cream is French vanilla.
Very nice. And Charles.
Hello, my name is Charles Woods III. I'm the Education Programs Manager as well as Community Engagement Coordinator for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. And my favorite ice cream flavor is cookies and cream.
Awesome. Well, Victor, I will let you take it from here. And remember, if you have any questions at all, be sure to comment in the chat.
All right. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Madison and Creative Mornings. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll jump right into this. Our first question of the day is, were you ever mistreated because of the color of your skin? And if not, do you know anyone who was ever mistreated by the color of their skin? As you think about this question, think about how it made you feel and how it's impacted your journey and your experiences. And I guess why don't we start with Javacia?
So for me personally, when I think about any mistreatment or microaggressions that I have faced because of my race, it's always also been tied to gender. So for me, those two things always intersect. Just one short example. I'm a journalist, as I mentioned, and once I was on a story and an older white man put his arm around me and yelled to his buddies, "Hey, check out my brown sugar girlfriend." And because of incidences like that, I would say that that has informed the work that I do. So for me, race and gender are always connected.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go now to Robert.
So I moved to Birmingham back in 2008. Originally from Texas, but back in Texas, the majority where I grew up is the size of Birmingham. It's called Laredo, Texas. The percentage there was 98% Hispanic. When I moved to Birmingham, there was the opposite. It was a total different situation. But the first time I remember, within 2 weeks of being in Birmingham, I was at a Starbucks and I was parked in front of a Starbucks that had just closed, and the policeman came to my window asking if I was smoking some drug, and I was like, what? I'm just drinking Starbucks. And so it was the first time in my life that I was put in the back of a police vehicle while they kind of went through my stuff, and then they say, well, there's nothing in your car, but wash your car because it smells like, that drug. And I was like, all right, well then it is what it is. But that was my personal situation, but I've heard of many stories beyond that. But being in Birmingham has really pretty much opened up my eyes to what is happening and what has been happening in the justice system for sure. But that's my take on it.
Wow, I'll chime in a little bit myself too with the panel. So mine was actually in my own neighborhood. There were some kids that were making sandwiches at one of my neighbors' home, and these kids were all lighter skinned kids. I'm a dark skinned Black man. And I went home to my mom and said, hey, make me a sandwich. I'm going to go play with these kids. And when I got back to the kid's house, actually he was half white. He might have been all white, but he was adopted by a Black family. And the mom was half white and half Black. So when I got there, the kids said, well, Victor, you can't eat sandwiches with us. And I said, why? And they said, well, you just can't. I said, why not? And they just said, you just can't. And I went home crying. So in my own neighborhood, that was kind of my experience. And I could really resonate with what I'm hearing from Robert and Javacia in terms of race and gender, and in terms of just being picked out because of being different. So Charles, let's go to you next.
So it's funny now that I think about it, I haven't even thought about those little things like that where, people even call me a name or, kind of single me out for stuff like that. I'm originally from California. I've been living in Birmingham now for about 15, 16 years. But in California, where I grew up, it was about 50-60% Hispanic or Latinx, and then Blacks, and then other races split them up. And so a lot of the interactions that I had early on in life were just name calling and bickering and kind of fighting with our Latin counterparts, brothers and sisters. And so, and that's just the nature of the area where I grew up. So usually just name calling and things of that sort. When I got to Birmingham, I had one incident in Clay happen where I did a 3-point turn in a gentleman's yard, and the gentleman made sure he ran out to me and my family. We were looking for houses in the area, and said, my driveway doesn't look like the street. And I was like, sir, I'm just trying to turn around so we can, get out of the neighborhood. And that was my first real interaction with something like that on that type of level here in the South.
Thank you, Charles. T. Marie.
For me, I've always attended predominantly white schools, so I've grown up hearing all types of things. But I would say something that may have impacted me majorly was, I think I was in the 11th grade, yearbook staff, and we had done such a good job, completed the yearbook early, and our yearbook advisor decided, we were going to have a cookout in celebration of it. And one of my staff members said, well, let's eat at my house. And so we went to her house, and it was like 10 of us on the yearbook staff, 2 of us were Black. And as we're walking up the steps to her house. Her mother, I'll never forget it, was sitting on the porch in a rocking chair, stonewashed jeans, with a purple shirt on, smoking a Virginia Slim. And she said, those niggers can't come in my house. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of stopped, and our teacher, who was, you know, a white gentleman, he said, well, if they're not welcome, none of us are welcome. And so we left and went, I think we went to like Little Caesars or something for pizza. But my issue wasn't even so much with her mother. My issue was with the girl, because she knew how her mother felt. And to put us in that position to experience that is what impacted my friendship and relationship with her. And has also consequently impacted my work.
Wow, that's amazing. And it sounds like what I'm hearing, and tell me if you agree, we have on one hand the courage of the teacher, then we have on the other hand either the ignorance, I think is what I'm hearing you say, of the young lady, or the just the audacity to put you guys in that situation, which I guess in many ways is what, as we fast forward to today, and as we go through this conversation, what you described is a lot of what we all are either experiencing or either guilty of as we place people that are different from us in situations where they can't succeed. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face as we have this discussion. Second question I'd like to ask everyone. Many of us could never have believed, and it's hard to believe it hasn't even been 30 days yet, that racism would be at the top of mind for so many, especially many in white America at this time, that are curious about racism, that want to understand it, that are denouncing it as wrong. As we look at how this has risen in the frame of mind of so many people, what are ways that you've responded when people ask you to help them to understand, hey, what's going on? Did their sudden interest take you by surprise? T. Marie, why don't we start with you?
It definitely didn't take me by surprise, because this is the work that I do. So for the past 3 weeks, I have been overwhelmed with requests of speaking to groups and having these conversations on race and difference. So I think what surprises me is probably more so people negating the fact that conversations with their family is so key. And not realizing that's where the hard work starts. You know, you can come to me and tell me all day long, hey, I see now, I can't believe I didn't realize this is going on. But if you're not brave enough to go back home, have those conversations with your children and have those conversations with your relatives. And in some cases, people need to separate from family members in order to move forward. So I think what surprises me most is probably the shock of people realizing I actually need to go back home and have conversations. You know, right now, that's the allyship I'm looking for, is for you doing that work at home.
That's amazing. You know, I've often tell many people that I speak with in my profession and even in my nonprofit activities that it is more challenging for me, and I have to have more courage to have a conversation with my son, my daughter, my grandchildren, or my wife than to give a speech to 500 or 1,000 people. It doesn't take as much courage to do that. So I agree with you 100%. Great points. Javacia, how about you?
As T. Marie said, I'm not really surprised by people's sudden interest. As far as how I respond when people ask me, you know, what should I do? I think it's important for our white allies to remember that they should not place the burden on Black people to educate them. Yes, it's fine to ask questions, but you need to do the work and do the research on your own. Don't put that burden on Black people. And also don't ask or expect a Black person to represent the entire race, right? We can't speak for the entire race. We all have our own individual stories. And yes, have those conversations because you need to exchange those stories, but don't expect that person to represent an entire race.
What a great point. I can recall times when I've been in maybe Bible study groups with men, and one of the first things they'll tell me after they've gotten to know me for a while is, hey, you know, I want you to meet my friend, and it may be at a football game and they bring their friend and it happens to be a Black person. And one day in a speaking engagement to about 30 of brothers I'm really close to, I said, listen, don't don't put me and your other friend in the same category because we're Black. If you got a Black friend, that's great, but you're my friend, he's your friend, and that friendship is based on something other than race. So when you really, it's almost like an insult to say, hey, it's almost like saying, well, I got one of those at my job and I want him to meet Victor. So when that situation happened, and it took a lot of years for me to have enough courage to make that statement, so I can really appreciate that. So now why don't we go to Charles? Charles, why don't you weigh in on that for us?
I really don't have much to say on that one. I'm kind of piggyback with Javacia. One thing that I do is I do try and point people in a direction. But part of the reason that we're in this situation now is that racism is so deeply embedded in every fabric of the society, not only in this country, but worldwide, that it has embedded into scholarship too. So when you allow people to kind of go do their own research, depending on what kind of authors and things that they're looking at, they're going to keep reinforcing that same narrative that we're trying to fix now. So I do like to give them a little nudge in a proper direction, because a lot of the authors that I read, they're like reconstructionists. They have to take the history and the scholars and the scholarship that's been done up to this point and rewrite history, because things were written to purposely pull Black people out. So I just like to nudge them in a good, what I think is a good direction.
Great. And I think the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is a great place for us to do that. And I hope we'll have time before the end of this to talk a little bit more about that. And I'm definitely going to be calling on you to help us with that conversation. So Madison, let us know, why don't we pause for a minute and see, do we have any social media questions that you can share with the panel?
Yes, we actually do. Someone asked, what discussions or changes do you feel need to happen within the creative community to help promote a more inclusive and accepting mindset? And then how can we make a difference?
So with the creative community question, should we maybe let our expert Robert kind of chime in on that, and then any other panelists that might be interested?
Yeah.
So from a creative perspective, again, going back to what it stands for is inclusion and diversity. And we promote all of that through arts, music, dance, film, theater, food, and sports. So a big majority of what we're trying to do here in the community, not just in Alabama, but throughout the country and the world, is to help promote that aspect of various cultures. So again, going back to what everybody was saying, learning from other cultures, learning from other subcultures as well. And you don't have to necessarily you can sometimes fall into it, like we do in public events or virtual events, but at the same time, to add to that virtual part of, not virtual, but the art part of it, is that I've been hearing a lot of conversations where people are mentioning, why do I know about your culture, but you don't know about my culture? And why do I have to be the one who teaches you everything about my culture? Because sometimes you're not the one source for all of that, right? So it's like, just go around and just do your own research. I myself, as an example, know about the Mexican culture and know about the US culture and other cultures. I know various foods, I know various, but it's all about the person, right? It's your dedication to that and doing that research. There's a lot of tools out there that you can do. Art is one of them. You can see all that when we had an earlier conversation about murals in downtown, or even just museums, or even just books. But obviously everybody might have a certain way of where they get their knowledge. A lot of things were wiped out, right? Some things were dictated on what to be said by state, by even some other countries as well, right? But we want to make sure that you educate yourself. Talk to somebody about it, but don't depend on them to give you all the information as they're a Google search or something, like they know everything about the culture. But at least learn one thing, ask one question. That's a starting point right there, and just help promote it and talk about it, and then you pass it on to somebody else. And what is that called? Spreading knowledge. That's all we're doing. We're spreading knowledge and listening. So listen and spread that knowledge so that you can learn, and we can all learn together within the creative community. And those are my thoughts.
That's great. Any other social media questions, Madison?
Not yet.
Oh, great. Well, I'll continue on then. I'd like for everyone on the panel to give us a brief synopsis of your personal story. We've heard some of that, I know already, but tell us about your journey, and think to where you are today, and then think back to where you were maybe when you were 10 years old and how you got here. I'll actually kick us off with my own quick story. Basically, at the age of 10, all I wanted to do was talk to people all the time, and I wanted to start a business. So I got in a lot of trouble in school for talking all the time. I got in a lot of trouble for starting businesses, especially if I had a job that was a conflict of interest for me to start a business. But fast forward to today, and I get paid a very good salary to do nothing but help people start businesses and to talk to people all day long on the phone and in person. So it's amazing how I got there. But throughout that journey, there have been some challenges based on my race and based on even my education status that have gotten me to where I am today. And some of those, like I said, are very painful. So I'd love to hear from the rest of the panel on that topic of how you got to where you are and how maybe race and or gender have impacted that. So Javacia, you want to kick us off next?
Sure. So my mother says that I've been writing since I could sit up straight. And so I've always loved writing, I always wanted to be a writer. And I definitely think race and gender have influenced the sort of trajectory of my career, because when I was in high school, I decided that I wanted to go into journalism, largely because I loved reading magazines and I very rarely saw girls who looked like me in those magazines. And so I decided when I was 15 that I wanted to go into journalism, maybe start a magazine for Black girls. And so I did study journalism. I worked for a newspaper for several years in Louisville, Kentucky. And then I decided to move back to Birmingham. I was born and raised here. I decided to move back here to teach English, again, writing stories, to teach English at the Alabama School of Fine Arts. And while I was there, most of the 10 years that I was there, I was the only Black core academic teacher. And I took that very seriously because I knew that it fell on me to be a role model for the Black girls in my classes. And you know, now I'm the founder of C. Jane Wright, and what I do with that work is really about just elevating women's voices, because through being a journalist, being a writer, being a teacher of English, it's really taught me that stories have the power to change people's lives, and therefore stories have the power to change the world. And so that is what I'm devoted to doing.
Wow, I love that. Let's see, why don't we go to Charles next?
Yeah, so like I said before, I'm originally from Southern California, the Inland Empire area, and I grew up in a single parent household. And my mother, now I realize after her death, were planting these little seeds in me when I was young. And when I was around 10, really between 10 and 12 years old, I remember getting into an argument with my teacher about our world histories lesson and where Egypt lied in the world's history. And then not only that, in whose history does it lie in? And so that was my first bout with trying to get people to understand that Egypt is a part of Africa, and Egypt was an ancient African Black civilization. And the teacher was just like, you know what, that's just not what it says in the book, Charles. And that let me understand that that I knew I lived in two worlds at that point, and that I needed to be able to survive in both of those worlds. And part of that survival was understanding that the history that they teach in school does not match up with the history that my mother was teaching at home, and that why was there that disconnect and where did it come from? And so I knew I wanted to go to an HBCU. I left California, went down south. All of the schools that I applied to were HBCU, except for one that I had to apply to one school in California to get financial aid. And so I left California when I was 18, went to New Orleans to Xavier University for my HBCU, and still was delusional in the sense that I wanted to major in the sciences. I felt like I needed to be a physician assistant or something like that to make money. Changed my major my first semester to history. And then my wife went to school there. I met her there. And then the rest is really history. But it sent me on a path to find myself and find where I come from and the contributions that my people have given to the world.
Wow, very well, very well. Thank you. That's great. T. Marie.
I always start this conversation about the fact that everybody's passion is not their purpose. And 10-year-old me wanted to be an EGOT. I wanted an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. That's all I cared about. That's all I focused on from 6 years old up until, I'll say early 30s, and was picked to march in the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery commemorative march that was put on by the National Park Services. And by the end of that experience, that shifted my work into activism. And I realized that I was purposed to figure out ways to bring people together, with truth being the foundation and the framework. But I've been blessed to be able to try to figure out how to incorporate my love for the arts in it. But yeah, that was my my road to activism. Not what I wanted to necessarily do, but was chosen to do.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Anybody else want to weigh in on that hasn't had a chance to weigh in on that? Just anyone from the panel that'd like to chime in on the synopsis of their personal story?
So I can go ahead and just tell you the story of how I got to Birmingham. Even then, it really changed my perspective on what I was going to do in life. Because at the beginning, when I was in Texas, born and raised there, I knew at that time in Laredo, I wanted to do something for myself and my family, be the first one to graduate from college. I knew I had the brains for it. I knew I had the passion and the drive to do it. So even that, to the age of 25, when I moved to Birmingham, I was like, I've made it. That's what I said to myself. I've made it. I'm going, and I've always dreamed of going to New York or LA or something big, right? And then that all changed. I was like, oh, the first opportunity was in Birmingham with BBVA. And I was like, well, let's do it. Then I was going to be in the marketing department and my degree in marketing. And when I got here, a lot of my perspective in life changed. As I told you that story when I was at a Starbucks, and within 2 weeks that happening to me. So I knew something was wrong, was off. Something was off. I was no longer in my safe zone or people that I knew, and I never knew that existed beyond that. I was like, wow, this is very different. I've never been. I never had to look at the color of my skin. Is pretty much what happened. I was like, oh my God, I am brown. I didn't even know that. Everybody else I knew was brown. But then that changed, like how people were like, oh, where are you from? Or what part of Mexico are you from? And I'm like, I'm from the Texas part. So a lot of those things like happened in my mind. So I was like, so this journey was like, oh, I'm educated. I have this, I have that. I want to start a career. And I had my career here in Birmingham. But then from there, that's when I became more of involved with the community in the nonprofit world. And in my whole life and my family as well. Excuse me, my whole family has been about love and amor, of course. So I was like, let's start something from my parents. They had passed away in 2017, sadly 5 months apart. And then that's where I was like, well, let me do something for them to commemorate them as well. And based on what I would like to do for the community and what I've been going through. So that's where Amor came in, Alabama Multicultural Organization, about love, inclusion, and diversity. And then from there, I was like, well, I have my career, but I know I can do something. I know I can make an impact, and I know I can make a difference, but I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to do my best at it, even if I fail or we grow or whatever happens, but I'm going to do something about it. And I pretty much always say this at the end is I was raised in Texas, but I grew up in Alabama. So that's pretty much how I kind of see this situation for me.
Wow, well said. I can relate to that too. Anybody that didn't share their synopsis, I'm sure before the end of our time together today, you'll have a chance to. Let's pause again and call on Madison, our phenomenal curator of social media questions. Anything out there, Madison?
Yes, actually, we have a couple. When you faced challenges about race in your life, who gave you the best advice, or who was your mentor?
Javacia, you want to start us off?
Sure. I don't know that I had a person that I would go to specifically for these types of issues, but I mean, my parents both just really encouraged me to always just be excellent and to go above and beyond, and that was the best way to challenge people who thought that I was less than, to just show them that they're wrong, basically. So, and not for their sake, but for my sake, to just always be excellent in anything that I did.
When you were doing that, can you share with us what were some of the thoughts and feelings when you first realized that you had to take that action to kind of show and prove, for lack of a better word?
I don't know that I mean, honestly, I didn't really think about it a lot of, oh, I'm doing this to prove people wrong. My parents sort of framed it as, you be excellent for your sake. And a byproduct of that will be that you will prove these people wrong. But, you know, I didn't go through my life thinking about, oh, I've got to be good at this so I can show someone that I'm good at this. You know, my parents just always stressed, be excellent at all that you do. And like I said, a byproduct of that is I'm proving people wrong, but that was never really my focus.
Gotcha. That makes sense. T. Marie, how about you?
Yeah, similar to Javacia, I don't remember anybody ever, inspiring that conversation. My mother's parents is from Lowndes County, Alabama. So we probably were more protective of just safety when you're in certain communities. I probably got that story more when you're in this community, or don't even go to this community. And then growing up, going to predominantly white high schools, I was more focused more so racially about my safety than I was of trying to be better than anyone. But I think that was just due to how my grandmother experienced Lowndes County, Alabama. And, my grandmother had a uncle who was killed by the Klan. So that was very prevalent for them of being safe in certain communities.
Yes, absolutely. Charles Woods, how about you?
Once again, I have to kind of go back to my mom. Later on, my mom passed away in 2017, and after the fact, I'm realizing all of these things that I think she did purposefully to get me prepared for being a Black man in America and just having to navigate this life. And so, similar to what Javacia was saying, my mother wanted me to, I'm not saying that I always did, but wanted me to strive for a high level of excellence. And she was very direct. She was like, people are looking at you, and you gotta represent almost for the race in a sense. But I've had 5 different Japanese exchange students come and live in my house when I was growing up. And one thing she told me was that she wanted to get into this exchange student program because the Japanese had a stigma about how they looked at Black people. And she wanted to prove that wrong. And she wanted to let these people know that Black people in America aren't what they think, and that we can sit down together and have meals together and have constructive talks about race and all types of things. And we let them ask us anything. And so that just kind of let me know that she was serious about myself being a Black man and not being the stereotype, or not being what we always see depicted in the media. And she made sure that I counteracted those stereotypes and those images.
Wow. I know that Madison shared with all of us a video that was done, Conversations with a Black Man, and the featured guests on that show were Chip and Joanna Gaines and their sons and daughters, Magnolia and Waco. They put Waco, Texas on the map in America. Very, very popular, especially among the majority community. I think really all of us, all of us really appreciate what they do, the Gaines family, but they really were very open about having that conversation. And to your point, Charles, sitting across the table from someone and getting to know them, that's the best way to get to know them. But if we allow the media, if we allow others that look like us, talk like us, act like us, agree with us, that make us feel comfortable, give us their opinion about a certain group of people, then we will never get to know that group of people the way we should. So in particular for the Black community, people that are willing to invite us to dinner, that I'm not a golfer, but if I'm invited to play golf or whatever the case may be, to spend time with another family, another person that's different from me, then they can get to know who Victor Brown is instead of assuming they know or misunderstanding who Victor Brown is based on some very shallow observations. So I really appreciate your comments. Madison, any other social media questions for us?
This one is, how does everyone personally choose to make a change in their community and help colleagues around them understand inclusiveness or inclusivity?
Charles, you want to kick us off on that one?
I will. So one of the main things that I try to do personally, or what I would even implore other people to do, is like support Black businesses. Go out there and support individuals and groups who have been marginalized or don't get that same opportunities and chances as other groups and organizations. I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of a brother by the name of Michael Eric Dyson, was the author that I don't read all his stuff. I don't agree with all his stuff, but he does have a few good things there. And one of the things he said is that what you can do is put your time and your money, I'm saying energy, also into helping Black communities and Black organizations. And so I'm not sure if the question is asking how do we personally get involved, or how do we want other people to get involved, but you just got to be supportive. And you have to honestly want to be constructive and want to build something. A lot of people just want the information, but then you're not gonna go and do anything with it. Educate yourselves, get the knowledge, get the information, and then act on it and try and make a personal change in your own lives to try and flatten out that equality or bridge that gap, I like to say, where you see that there are gaps in between individuals. I don't know if that makes any sense.
That is so well said, and I'm so glad you brought in the business conversation, because obviously that's what I make a living doing. And I'll give a shout out right now to Jeremy Duckworth. He's the leader of the Western Community Redevelopment Alliance, and the Western Communities Redevelopment Alliance is focusing on helping Black-owned businesses from all the way from Titusville and 4th Avenue Business District, where a lot of great work is being done by Urban Impact, all the way to the 5 Points West area, 5 Points West Business Alliance, to Inslee, Midfield, Fairfield, Bessemer. So we all, as employees of companies, as business owners, we have an opportunity to do business with Black-owned businesses, to invest in Black-owned businesses, to help support foundations and grant-making organizations, making donations. And I agree, I think that is part of the change that we need to happen. Oftentimes, and I love to hear others weigh in on this question, and even what I'm saying now, is that we want to take a conversation like racism and say, well, okay, that conversation, that's not a business conversation, but we'll make a social comment about it, and then let's get back to work. But we've got to weave in the conversation about racism into the business community, small and large businesses, because racism has interweaved itself within all aspects of their lives. So I'd love to hear others weigh in on that, as well as the question itself.
I would just add, I agree with the support business-wise. I'm not necessarily looking for equality, I'm looking for equity. And that's what Black and Brown communities have been missing, is equity and access. And I mean, even as basic as access to information, information is not equitable, and yeah, you can give, if you go give local. I think you should give to Black and Brown communities and businesses within the space that you live in. But I mean, you also got to show up and help us vote these fools out of office. These folks that are not doing what they're supposed to do, they're showing up and doing what you need to do at the polls. I want to see that level of action. I also want to see organizations that are, Birmingham is a Black city. And there's a bunch of organizations in Birmingham that are white led, and not only white led, but fully white staff. You want to be equitable, partner with Birmingham City Schools and create a pipeline of apprenticeships for these Black and brown students to get into careers of architecture, to get into careers of design, and innovation. I want to see that level of equity start shifting our community.
On the topic of, thank you for bringing up the topic of voting. So a lot of people don't know this, but I started my career, I was a young T. Marie King. I was a male version of a T. Marie King. So I started out at 15 years old. I was president of NAACP Youth Council. A few years later, I started the first chapter of NAACP on the campus of Georgia State University in Atlanta, predominantly white university. One of the greatest stories I have is being that I'm a very conservative person by nature, not very political, not very divisive, but I was asked by the more, I would say, militant Black Student Union, hey, we want to have a Black teacher. We didn't have a Black teacher at Georgia State. So I said, well, I don't want to really lead that movement. They said, well, you have to, because you've got the relationship with all of the powerful white administrators. So what ended up happening was we went to I set an appointment to meet with President Noah Langdale. And when I got to the meeting, I had 30 of my friends with me from the Black Student Alliance. And basically at that meeting, we demanded a Black professor. And I got called the next day asking, Victor, why did you do that? And why didn't you ask permission? I said, well, if I'd asked permission, would you have allowed it? And the answer was no. But basically, my experience from high school all the way through college, it was like pulling teeth to get others to join the movement, to get involved in. It took me forever to get whether that's voting. What, T. Marie, in your mind, and I love to hear Charles Woods weigh in on this as well, what do we need to do in terms of apathy and increasing our turnout at the polls and that type of thing?
I think we have to be more vocal, but I also think education is a big piece. I think people should be continuously being educated on how this person being in this judgeship, this person being in this office, in this position affects them in their community, in their neighborhood. And I don't think over time we have been very good at keeping that momentum of keeping people engaged. I think people are apathetic because they're not seeing things change in their community. So if I'm going and voting year after year after year, and I'm voting the same way grandmama voted when she started voting and got the right to vote, and I still have not seen the change in my community, but I feel like, example, probate judge. We had an election a few years back on probate judge, and I was trying to edge on, hey, we need to be concerned about who gets the position of probate judge. Well, why? Why does probate judge matter, T. Marie? Because probate judge just received voter restoration. And so if we're doing this advocacy to be able to get their voting rights back so they can participate, but it goes to probate judge, and the person that's in probate judge sitting on the bench don't care for Black or brown people, we got a problem. And so I think we have to make sure we're continuously educating people, even if, this work is a marathon, it's not a sprint. But I think education is a big piece of responding to apathy.
Before we go to Charles, thank you, T. Marie. Before we go to Charles, Javasia, I'd love for you to weigh in on this social media question about choosing to make a change. How can individuals use writing and the power of words and writing to do that?
That's a great question. And I think writing is a great way to bring about change, because we as humans, we live our lives through stories. We understand the world through stories. Our major world religions are tied to stories. Everything goes back to stories. So I think it's about getting your story out there, but also if you are in a position where you have a platform or resources or connections where you can elevate other people's voices, you need to do that. So not just sharing your story, but helping other people share their stories too, because stories are very powerful, but they can be dangerous, because if you're getting a single story, then you're getting a very warped and skewed view of a group of people, of an issue. If you're, we were talking about voting, if you're just getting this single story that voting doesn't make a difference, then you stop voting. And so you need those stories. You need someone like T. Marie. You need to elevate her voice so that she can get her message out there. And show people why voting does matter. So it's about being brave enough to share our own stories, and then also using any sort of resources or connections or platform that we have to elevate the stories of other people too.
Absolutely, that's great. Charles Woods, tell me what you think about what you've heard, and also I'd love to hear a little bit about how we can leverage one of the greatest crown jewels in the world has yet to be elevated to where it really Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. How can we leverage that, and what are your thoughts on what you've heard?
So I mean, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Javacia and T. Marie have already said. You need to educate, you need to amplify good voices, and then you need to come to the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Come learn this history. Come learn the very specific and special perspective that Birmingham had on the civil rights movement as a whole. And go to our website, www.bcri.org, and help us donate. And look at our outreach, check out our lesson plans, and just learn about the history that has occurred before us. I was one of those people, when I came to Birmingham, I felt like my voice didn't count. I worked in management in Birmingham for many years before I got this position. And when I got this position, my supervisor, he really laid it into me that if it wasn't so important to vote, why did they take such concerted efforts to try and keep Black people from doing it? And that just hit me in the gut. It made me start paying attention. I grew up in my first political party was an independent party in California, started by the Black Panther Party. And so I had to get to Alabama and educate myself about how political things work here, and then get involved. And so I would just say, do the same thing, educate yourself, see how things run and see how things function, and then get involved. And make sure that you're voting, and paying attention to the votes that you're making. Those, abracadabra kind of voting now where you don't know who anybody is, but you're just filling in a circle. We don't need to be doing that, right? We need to know who everybody is on that ticket and where they stand, and how that reflects to you personally, and you, whatever group you're passionate about as a whole.
So that speaks to voter education as well as voter registration, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Absolutely. Madison, any other social media questions for us?
Yes, there are. Here's a good one. Please comment on what the local universities can do to better serve the Black community in the Birmingham region. So what can the local universities do better to serve the Black community in the Birmingham region?
I'll kick off with something that I serve on the board of trustees at Sanford University, and something I'm excited about that President Westmoreland did was he just promoted 2 African Americans at Sanford into roles of diversity, and it was influenced by the conversation we're having today, influenced by the events of the past couple of weeks. He took very, very swift and decisive action, which is something that President Westmoreland has done since he got there. But I am so excited about how that's going to unfold, that those positions will be directly involved in impacting how Black students at Sanford are feeling. So more to come on that, but I'd love to hear what other panelists have to say. Anyone on the panel in terms of local colleges and universities?
Well, I'll just kind of jump in there. I think they have an obligation to make sure that the students that are leaving their universities are equipped to deal with the type of world that we live in right now. And so in that, I would hope that they are training them in a sense to not only navigate the things that we've seen transpire in the last few weeks, but also be able to check themselves and where their own prejudices and biases lie when they embark out into these new careers that they'll be embarking upon. I do a lot of outreach to little children, and I love talking to little children. But I always tell them that, they'll be leaders of this world very soon. And where are you going to lead us? You're going to lead us 50 years forward, or you're going to lead us 50 years back? And so it's the same thing with these college students. A lot of college students are coming out not being introduced to any of these things that we're talking about today. I just sat on a committee panel with individuals who said that the first time they ever sat next to a Black person was at Auburn University when they got to college. First time they've ever talked to a Black person was when they got to Auburn University in college. I said, that is horrible, right? I don't even see, me coming from a very multicultural area, I don't even see how that's possible. But those are the type of things that universities should be in the forefront of making sure that these individuals have these types of experiences so that they don't go off into a world where they're oblivious to the fact of other people's experiences and what other people have gone through. So I would hope that they, and you would think you would learn that in a social studies or a history class or something like that, but those things aren't being taught. So I would hope that they would have some other kind of cultural or something, awareness or something going on the campus where these individuals are ready for the real world and the world that we live in.
I don't know if any of you were students at UAB, but I know UAB for years has had an area, a vice president that's over equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I've got a great counterpart in the diversity work that we've done in supply diversity for business, Demetria Scott, and she's involved in that area. But I've had a lot of great conversations, participated in many, many programs with UAB and that department. And they've really done a yeoman's job in many cases with identifying Black-owned companies that could perform at the highest level. And that's what it's all about, is we want to, in Birmingham and really all over our nation, identify the best and the brightest businesses and potential employees. And we don't want to overlook Black talent because they're Black. We want to make sure that if this is the best company to provide this product or service for a business, for a university, then we want to make a pathway for success for all of us to make that happen. Any other examples of colleges or universities before we move on? Madison, any other social media questions?
You're muted, Madison.
Yes, we do. And we have time for like one more question before we wrap up. So
all right.
Last question. Have any experience influenced you to accept others, even though they might have hurt you? So I'll repeat it. Have any experiences influenced you to accept others, even though they might have hurt you?
If you don't mind, I'll jump in on that too. I try to include and accept everyone. But one thing that I do is that I'm a historian and I look at history. And so, but in that, and this is what I try and tell my children, is that, you know, we love everyone and you can't exclude somebody. So let me say it like this. And if you've already said it, Victor, you want to sit across the table from someone, you want to get to know someone. And the only way you can do that is really to sit across the table from them, talk with them, learn from them, get to know them. I don't demonize a whole group of people for some things that happened in the past or any of that. So the hurt that I have with white supremacy and systemic racism is not something that I direct to individuals that I meet on a daily basis. It's something that I utilize to make sure that my family, particularly, and the individuals that I'm educating, know what occurred, so that it won't occur again. And so I don't, even though I may be hurt, which I am, I'm Victor, I'm a little insecure as well. But I don't let that insecurity cloud my mind and my judgment, and I don't let it distance me from other people in my society, because I think that'll be the wrong way to go. And I know I'm not a hermit. I know I'm not sitting on an island. I need these people, they need me. And so I do my best to interact and function with everyone. But I also keep my eyes open and pay attention because a lot of these things and these atrocities that we've been dealing with for many years are still occurring. And this is kind of sad and bad to say, but as a Black man, I'm always looking over my shoulder thinking, am I next? Is it my turn? And then I try and do everything in my power to make sure that that doesn't occur as well. So I don't know, that's a good question.
Guess we're turning it back over to Madison Hall Benjamin.
Yes, unless anyone has any other answers to that. No.
The only thing I would say, I accept everybody, but if you hurt me, you get a warning in a teaching moment. But if you come back and you hurt me again, your access to me is limited, because this is what I do. I'm here to teach people and help educate you, but also my mental health is not going to be at the expense of your learning curve. So you get a teaching moment, and then we have to shift some things.
I like that.
I think for me, it's about I've had to learn to really be patient with people, and especially in this time right now, because people, our theme for this month is insecure. And when we were talking about apathy earlier, I think for some people, it's not actually apathy, it's insecurity. They seem apathetic, but the reason they aren't speaking out is simply because they're insecure and they don't know, they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing or ask the wrong thing. And the thing is, you probably are. You probably are going to say the wrong thing, but just be brave enough to do it anyway. And so for me personally, during this time, I've got to be more patient with people as they make those mistakes and as they ask the wrong thing and say the wrong thing. I need to be a bit more patient with them because they're at least trying. That's the thing that I've learned. And again, this is with people that I know their heart. And so I'm keeping that in mind.
Good grace.
And if I can add to that, so speaking of insecurities, yes, like I myself, again, comes back from family to friends, teachers, mentors, all that is based off of insecurities in a sense. My family pointed out my insecurities from the beginning, let me just say that. And then from there, it was like, oh, I didn't know my insecurities about careers, not insecurities about who I was and community, but knowing that I love everybody and love the world, and also what Amore stands for in our organization is how do we move on to a level where everybody's understanding and listening, right? So going to the table, talking, some things may be said that are very make you feel very insecure or threatened at times, but listening from their work perspective is where they're getting that information, and then you provide your information. But like everybody was saying, yeah, there's a level where, okay, after that, your learning curve, you're on your own, because I got to move on to the other subject here of other individuals that I want to be a part of and want to be part of my life and show love to them. So at the end of the day, just listen is what I want to say to anybody we come in contact with. Even though our heart's in the right place, and their heart's in the right place, but there's something that's not communicating well there. So it's just about listening to both sides and educate like from what I've heard all around.
Yeah, love that. Well, I guess we'll end it at that. And thank y'all so much for joining us today. I know everyone is thoroughly enjoying learning more. I know there's a million different things being thrown around of ways to learn, but I'm so glad that y'all joined us today to help educate the community and make it a little bit more of an inclusive environment. And another huge thanks to our local sponsors. We could not do it without them. Our global sponsors, of course, WordPress and MailChimp. And thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Madison.
Thank you.
Yeah. And big thanks to Victor, too, for moderating this.
It was my pleasure. What a great panel. Thank you all.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, y'all have a